Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about A Crimson Campaign, Book 2 of the Powder Mage series by Brian McClellen. So, as always, this is going to be a actual complete spoiler review because it's the second book in the series. So if you haven't read it, please go ahead and read it, or if you don't care about spoilers, continue to watch. So yeah, with that being said, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and let's begin. So, the Powder Mage series. Okay. The plot description of it is so clear and concise. It is so it's such a perfect little blurb to kind of describe the story. It's essentially like Tamis goes to behind enemy lines to kind of enact a coup on the Kez government and military and stuff, but it fails almost immediately, and then he's trapped behind enemy lines with most of the powder mages of the military, and now they're basically in a race to get back home before the rest of the Kez army finds them and kills them all. So all while that's happening, we have Taniel back at home dealing with all this weird military stuff that kind of implies that there's going to be a betrayal or there's some sort of double agent stuff happening. So, I mean, granted, that's my paraphrasing of the plot description, but that's essentially what's going on. So, it's interesting that this kind of picks up a little bit after where we were before, where you see that Taniel is dealing with the aftermath of thinking that he's killed Kresimir, even though he hasn't. He's kind of dealing with it in a kind of a depressed, kind of almost PTSD way. He's kind of fallen into drugs and stuff and is like moping around and just, not really I guess he seems to want more credit for what he thinks he did, killing Kresimir, but nobody believes Kresimir is dead because he's supposed to be a god. So that's kind of understandable. But I find it interesting that Brian did this thing where he sent Tamis away and had him enact a military campaign that basically leaves everybody back home in Adua thinking that he's dead. So they think that their greatest military leader is dead along with the majority of their powder mages. So they're basically, I guess they would just like not have any hope in the rest of the battle. But I think it's kind of interesting that Brian did that because now that we know that the people back home think that they're dead, even though we as the reader know he's not dead and he's trying to get home, we know that he is essentially in no danger going home because you can't kill him on the way home after having everyone back home thinking he's dead. Does that make sense? Like it, just in a meta contextual way, it would be a waste of that setup essentially. Like there's no point to send him off somewhere and have people think he died, only for him not to die, but then die shortly after. So it wouldn't make sense. So it essentially throws a layer of plot armor on Taniel. So that for me honestly left me in a position of not really caring about his storyline because I'm like, okay, I thought the main crux of this series was going to be this relationship between the father and son, which it kind of still is, but I thought it was going to be more of their interaction stuff. But now it's kind of a how are they without each other kind of thing. So I didn't really think Tamis was dead. So that completely, killed all stakes for his storyline entirely. But there was some interesting stuff that kind of happened during this storyline. I didn't like a lot of the military stuff that was happening in his storyline. I didn't care for a lot of the like jargon and a lot of the like day-to-day minutia of the military and running the army and all this kind of stuff and trying to keep them safe and figure out where to go. A lot of that just became noise to me after a while because, like I said, it felt like there was no stakes in his plot, and it just didn't really, it wasn't going to amount to much of anything until he got back home, which I figure wasn't happening till near the end of the book. So it just completely dropped all stakes for me. But there was some interesting points at which we can, we're with Tamis and stuff, and he's thinking about stuff that Taniel has given him, like he gave him this gun or gave him this knife or whatever, and like he's really thinking of his son fondly, because obviously he's probably thinking of his own mortality being so, being behind enemy lines and being chased and everything. So we get this kind of interesting dynamic between the two, at least in reference to their relationship, because Tamis is thinking about Taniel and like wanting to get back home to him and stuff like that, and then we have Taniel up here like kind of being in denial for a while that his dad is dead and stuff, and like knowing that they had a contentious relationship with the idea that like he asked him to have his best friend kill his best friend and stuff like that in the last book. So it's kind of interesting to have these like it kind of gives off this feel that Taniel has this feeling of there's so much left unsaid. So we kind of have this like emotional through line whenever we kind of like broach the subject of his father and stuff. And then on top of that, everyone is like, all the powder mages are dead, so the people that had resentment against the powder mages are effectively taking that out on Taniel. They're like, well, your dad, who basically had you outside of the military structure because you're a powder mage, he's dead. All the other powder mages are dead, so we can treat you like crap, even though he's the one doing most of the work on the front lines to keep them from being completely obliterated while Tamis and the other powder mages are gone. So it's an interesting story arc he has. It gets incredibly frustrating because you're sitting here on his side, you're on Taniel's side, like he's doing everything he can. He's running to the front line. He's like literally doing everything he can to keep the country safe and to try to help push this war and to stop them from losing, because they had been just retreating and retreating and retreating until he was jumping on the front line and stuff. So it's kind of interesting to see. It just becomes very frustrating, I guess, when the higher ups start to go after him. So at this point, when they're like starting to basically push him and stuff in order to get him to do stuff, they're trying to court martial him and like all this kind of stuff. So that just kind of put in my head, somebody's working for the Kez. Like, why would you do this? Like, why would you treat your most useful soldier this way? You know, like, why? Like, he's your last powder mage. They're incredibly valuable. Not only is he like your last powder mage, he's Taniel Two-Shot. He's like one of the best powder mages you have. So, like, it's just so weird to me. So I'm like, somebody's clearly working for the Kez. Like, somebody's not to be trusted. So I'm thinking that one lady that just kept pushing and pushing and pushing, I'm assuming in book 3 it would be revealed that she was a double agent or something like that. I don't know. But I thought that was just fascinating. But that storyline kind of left me frustrated because a lot of it was jumping between military jargon, military minutia of running all of that kind of stuff, which I found incredibly boring, and this incredibly frustrating storyline where they're just poking at Taniel. Like, leave the man alone. Like, that's kind of how I was feeling. Like, it was bugging the crap out of me. So I have this like blah storyline, and then this half blah, half frustrating storyline between the father and son, and I just really want their father-son dynamic. I just really want more of that. So all the other stuff going on around it is like whatever to me. But the plot line I really thoroughly enjoyed was the plot line that feels like it's in a completely separate book. Adamat's plot line feels like it's coming from a completely different book, and it's so hilarious. So last book, his family was essentially kidnapped because he took out a loan in order to start a publishing company. It didn't go well and stuff, and it ended up folding. And then like the banker sold his loan to this shiesty guy who basically took his family as hostages in order to ensure he pays back the loan. So he's going through all this stuff trying to get his family back and stuff, and just through the whole book, he's like running missions and bribing these people, getting money from these people, going here, doing just this entire whole kind of thing. And it's like, oh my goodness. And I'm like really feeling for him and stuff. I really want to get his family back and everything. And I was really like right there with him. So it's interesting to me that I don't think this plot line is over, because I think it has to resolve itself in book 3. Like completely resolve itself in book 3. But when we get to the point where he gets his wife back, he's got like 8 of his 9 children back and stuff. And we find out that one child was sold into slavery and stuff. And I'm like, okay, we got to go to this other country. We got to go get the kid, right? Right? That's what we're doing. We're going to hop on. We got the money from old dude. We got the money from the other guy and stuff. We got the money we needed. Let's just go and, wreck shop. Let's go get the son. And then like the mom is so traumatized. And so she's basically saying, can we just be grateful that we got the 8 kids back that we got? Like, can we just be grateful that we, let's not push our luck kind of thing. And he's just like, oh, he's both like, yes, I kind of agree. I'm very grateful that we got our kids back, the ones that we do get back. He like, but if I don't get our other son back, then it feels like he's an absolute failure. It's like it's like all for one or none for all, or I don't know. It's like one and there's no good phrase for that. It's like if he even loses one child, that means he's completely failed. Essentially, that's how he feels about it. So even when they're trying to, it seems like their friend who's like, let's just go on this like vacation thing, seems like he's trying to do a very subtle kind of covert way of getting them there, so they can work on that without just kind of going in guns blazing like Adam kind of wants to. So I really hope we get to see more of that like play out in the 3rd book. So I thought that was fascinating. But like that entire plot line was just completely like, it felt like a completely different book. Like it felt like it was in a completely different book. But and it's also kind of weird that, I mean, the magic system in this story is far more prevalent than something like the First Law. But the knacks, their powers, their that part of the magic system, at least with Adamat, is it kind of doesn't come in handy that much. He has like essentially an eidetic memory, and it just, at least on the page, it doesn't come in handy, or it isn't mentioned explicitly that often. It kind of leaves me in the place where I forget that he has an ability after a while. So like it's like, oh, I'm hoping that comes back and we get a little more exploration of it. I mean, granted, it's a very rudimentary kind of ability, but what's the point to giving him an ability if he's not going to, discover interesting, unique ways to make use of it? So I hope we kind of do that later. But I'm wondering if the way this plot line kind of wraps up with them not getting the last kid, I'm wondering if that's like a thing of Brian, like doing the whole, not every plot line will work out perfectly. Things don't just, come to a perfect, smooth, and, clean conclusion like they do in most stories. In real life, that doesn't happen. See, I don't know if he's like going for that kind of a thing or what, because he's done that with multiple plot lines where it just kind of ends. Like the guy, speaking of Adamat's plot line, right? The guy who bought the debt and everything, who was the main antagonist of his plot, the big bad guy, right? So this guy gets captured by somebody else and is killed off page, and Adamat has like nothing to do with it. And I thought that was interesting. I'm like, wouldn't the character who has, the most to gain from the death of this character at least be somewhat involved, or, get some sort of satisfaction from their downfall or something? And it's just like, nope, because stuff like this happens. He was tied up in a bunch of other stuff, and he got caught up by this other Potter. No, he was a privilege. He got caught up by him and stuff, and got killed or whatever. And like, well, that's just that. So I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Because that's very much not everything ends cleanly. Not everything is going to be like Adamat getting his specific revenge or something. It's just, sometimes it just ends. And I'm like, oh, so is that what we're doing with the children where, in the real life situation, you probably wouldn't be able to get all the kids back. Like, and that kind of thing. Like, is that something that's happening? So I'm kind of curious to see what happens there. But one of my biggest issues, probably my biggest issue of this story, is the letdown of Kresimir. So there's two main like god characters in here. One we spent the first book not believing was a god. That's Mihaly, the Adam Reborn guy, who I really like. He's a fun exposition dump character, and he explains a lot of things about the way the magic works and stuff that just makes it fascinating for me. Surprise, surprise, Cam really likes magic systems and world building. But that kind of stuff I really, really dug. But I was very disappointed in Kresimir. Like, yes, he got shot in the eye and shot in, like, the mouth or something. So he's injured, and Mihaly basically says it's driving him crazy, and it's like, I guess it's weakened him, because we've got all this build up in the first book. He is this god. He is literal god who's going to come and destroy the country because we've overthrown the bad king and stuff. So he's just built up as this huge threat. Like, at least in my head, maybe I built it up too much, because I'm like, huge, like, he's a god, like, he's a god, like, so come on. But then he's just leading the Kez army now. I'm like, all that build up just for him to become a military leader. I'm like, is this just kind of like, I imagine this is just kind of a start to all the stuff, because he does something towards the end of the book that kind of blew my mind. So when he opens the Else, and I think he teleports Adam / Mihaly, whatever his name is. I think he teleports him, but it's implied that he kills him. I think he just teleports him. Because if you unceremoniously, almost off page, way in the distance, obliterate your coolest character, I'd be like, Brian, stop. I'd be so mad about it. But I don't really think he's doing that. I think he's kind of going to explore more about what they are, because they are not gods. They appear to be just very, very well adept, prettying kind of privileged people or whatever, with that kind of access to that power. So, or maybe they're extra dimensional beings from the Else. So who knows? So maybe we're going to get some kind of explanation for that, because I just really don't think Mihaly is dead. I think it's just, he's so cool. But, and there's another little thing that happens. It's kind of a random side story. one of the people who was basically screwed over by the same guy that screwed over Adamat, she eventually discovers that, or the girl who was basically guarding the last heir to the previous dynasty or whatever. So she discovers she's a privilege, but I don't know where that plot's going. So she's hanging out with this other privileged guy, and she kind of discovers that she's a privileged. And I'm assuming it's going to have some big ramifications in the third book, because it just kind of is like, oh, that's interesting. A new character we didn't really get to know at all. We kind of just got to know, and she's a privileged. Interesting. So I don't know, maybe it's going to come to head in the next book. I don't know. But yeah, this book, honestly, for me, was very much a mixed bag. I am feeling incredibly burnt out on military stuff. So all the military jargon, the minutia, and the talk of supply lines and all this kind of stuff is just like incredibly boring for me. But they're like mostly Adamat's storyline. But there's a lot of other stuff in this book that really kept me interested. So I mean, I don't really do scoring, but I'd probably score this somewhere like a 4 or a 5. Like that's, well, out of 5, I'd give it a 3. So I'd give like a 3 out of 5, because I do think some of the expositional world building stuff that we get with Adam Reborn was fun. The Adamat stuff is fun. The father-son dynamic of the relationship between Tamis and Taniel, I think, is still a lot of fun and interesting. We still got a lot more to go with it. So I'm kind of going to be optimistic about it. But the military stuff, boy, oh boy, did that really that was tough. That was tough. That was tough. That was just tough for me. I don't know. It was tough. So yeah, let me know in the comments down below. Have you read The Powder Mage? Have you read Crimson Campaign? What did you think about it? Did you think that the military stuff was kind of boring? Did you really enjoy Adamat's plotline? Are you curious to see where that's going to go like I am? Let me know about all that in the comments down below. And as always, if you'd like to support the channel, you can check out the Patreon. The link is down in the description. If you want to support the channel in the old-fashioned way, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. So, as always, I will talk to you all next time.